Hello and welcome to Midtone Reviews, and today I'm going to be reviewing the new Artic Monkeys album, Tranquility, Base, Hotel and Casino. So Tranquility, Base, Hotel and Casino is the sixth album which the Artic Monkeys have released, and it's also their first album in 5 years, after I'd say the disappointing AM for the original fans. And people have been hyping this up because they're like, where have they been? What have they been doing? Like, he's been hinting stuff, Alex Turner, the rest of the band members have been hinting here and there, like, oh yeah, there's going to be a new album, oh yeah, I might release a single or something. It's essentially been going on for the last 5 years, so it's been extremely hyped up, this album, and does it live up to the hype? So you're probably going to start listening to this, and you're probably going to think, this is completely different. Like, what's going on? Especially with style treatment of how it opens up with the sort of first two notes with the piano and sort of the jazzy lounge drums in there. And you're thinking, wait, am I actually listening to the Artic Monkeys? And I sort of had that sort of feel to it, and especially when he goes, oh, I used to think I was one of the Strokes. We said something like that, Alex Turner. And it's sort of referring back to his old self, because his old self, essentially, there's essentially a bit of beef between him now and himself, like 12 years ago, because he said, oh yeah, you're not from New York City, you're from Rotherham, to sort of like, stop trying to act like, I don't know, you're from New York, you're an American. But that's sort of what he does now, and then of course, he used to think he was part of the Strokes, so it's sort of self-explanatory. And I thought that was quite good, and sort of all of the references to sort of like people pressuring him to do all of this sort of music, like the first two albums, which I have to admit are probably the two best albums. But yeah, I sort of quite like that song, sort of lyrically, and that there wasn't too much going on with like the rest of the instruments and that. It sort of just put you into it straight away. Nothing like, oh yeah, we're just going to add hundreds of like pianos and all that sort of stuff. Many of the songs do actually have that similar sort of thing where it has a sort of jazz lounge sort of feel to it. And it feels sort of like he's writing quite a lot of James Bond songs. If like the Artic Monkeys had to write like a James Bond song, that's sort of like the sort of feel I had to a lot of the songs, especially the track, the album, you know what I mean, the track just named after the album, there we go. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that definitely did. That sounded sort of quite like, oh yeah, you can just imagine sort of James Bond walking in. It didn't really have much energy to it, that track. And yeah, I don't know if it was like the track name, they could have sort of changed it or something. Maybe shortened it a bit, because it's a bit of a mouthful to some people, especially for sort of like what's supposed to be sort of the most popular song on the album. Of course, having this sort of jazz lounge sort of vibe to this album, of course they're going to change up the production. I think overall it was quite neat and quite nice. There was nothing sort of too bad in there. Like, the guitars were clean, which were good for that sort of sound, but also bad because you wanted to have a bit of energy, and I thought, like, if they did do that to the guitars and that, like, it would have added a bit of energy. The piano was really safe, I think. I think it was quite interesting adding in all of these sort of like synthy effects in some songs, such as Science Fiction. I really enjoyed that sort of song with its sort of like, with its sort of weird sound effects, synthy sound effects and that. I wasn't too keen on the drums either. It was like, I've heard them before. But the bass playing and sort of like the bass, I liked it how they sort of made it. So it was there, but it wasn't too overpowering. Like, it wasn't just a thing where it was just like, oh yeah, we're just going to back up the rest of the instruments. It actually had a bit of its own place, and it was quite smooth and quite nice. I quite liked some of the bass riffs. Like, that was one of the, sort of, probably one of the strongest parts of the album, was they were quite good. So I know it wasn't typical sort of Artic Monkeys sort of riffs or anything, but they sounded quite nice, and they were sort of really well done technically in that. When you're talking about the Artic Monkeys, you have to talk about Alex Turner and his input into the album with his sort of vocals and his lyrics and that. He's essentially sort of the brain behind it all, or at least in my opinion, and in sort of the public image and the public eye. And I think that his singing is actually better than the AM, because AM was just like really bland. It's just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna just do, oh yeah, generic sort of 2000s rock sort of thing, oh yeah. But I think that there is a bit of class to his singing and that, and he has that sort of, you could tell with some of it, like, oh yeah, he's still from sort of up North England and that. And yeah, I quite liked that, and he sort of made it a bit more English. I know that there was still sort of this American influence of jazz and that sort of stuff, but I think it was quite nice to sort of hear that he still sort of has that sort of English side in him when he goes, oh yeah, this bloody thing or something. I can't remember what. I think it was American sports or something. I know the rest of it was quite bland and it was a bit of a filler. I'll get onto that later, but yeah, I think that was quite good, and I didn't mind the lyrics out of 4 out of 5, and that was quite interesting on sort of his take on like critics and that, especially with AM sort of definitely getting mixed reviews and mixed views and that. And this album's probably going to do the same. It's probably even worse in terms of the split between, oh yeah, people think it's good, people think it's bad. And yeah, I quite liked listening to some of the songs and that. There were a few filler sort of stuff, like I said, American sports didn't really have much going for it. Golden Trunks was a bit boring and a bit bland. You were like, it just seemed like they were just adding in a song. They needed a song there to sort of like separate the two other songs. The song She Looks Like Fun, it sort of just sounds like a typical sort of AM sort of thing, but sort of calmed down a bit, which is a bit boring and that. And I thought, even though he did show off his sort of accent, his vocal range in it, it just didn't really sound very interesting in that. You sort of think, oh yeah, I've listened to this before. Ultra Cheese as well is a bit of like, oh yeah, they need just a song to sort of finish it off. They don't really have all of these ideas, which is a bit annoying really. You thought that they would have had a bit more in terms of sort of songwriting and that, to sort of have it like Star Treatment, Tranquility, Base Hotel and Casino, which are sort of two of the stronger tracks. You thought that they would actually put them ideas into some of the other songs, sort of vocally, lyrically, and also sort of musically, because a lot of the drums and that sort of sound the same, the sort of similar sort of piano notes and chords and keys and sort of stuff like that. And it just didn't really sound like there was sort of much added into there, especially that they had 5 years sort of in this. I know they've done other projects and that, and they were all doing sort of separate things for a couple of years, but still it's quite annoying, especially after waiting 5 years, there's not that much sort of on some of the tracks. The overall flow of the album, it flows quite well. I think that they actually put them all into sort of the correct place. I know Star Treatment sort of throws you in, but I think that was what sort of he wanted to do, and there was also sort of American Sport and all, you know, all of the other tracks. They sort of all flows quite well, and they did have some sort of transition in. Some songs did, some songs didn't, but I think that that's the sort of thing that actually worked with this album, and it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like it was amazing or anything. It wasn't like the Beatles or Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. I wasn't expecting that, but it flowed alright. I think one of the main cons of this album is probably two things, which is the lack of guitars and the lack of energy. When you sort of think of the Artic Monkeys, even in their last album, they had sort of this focus around a lot of the guitars and sort of the riffs and that. Even though some of them were sort of subpar and that, I wasn't too big on AM. Like, they sort of tried out sort of different things with the guitar. And there wasn't really much there. Yeah, okay, yeah, it was played really clean. Probably a bit too clean, to be honest. And yeah, it just seemed really lacking. It could have been added in a bit more, especially sort of having these sort of synths and pianos, which should have really taken a back seat. It would have helped a lot more if they actually had sort of a bit more guitar playing, maybe sort of have it a bit rough around the edges, but they didn't really do that, which really annoyed me, to be honest. And then also the other thing, which has been lacking in probably every single album since the first two, is really the lack of energy. That was what sort of was the main appeal of the Artic Monkeys. They had this energy, they were sort of youthful, they were talking about sort of just stuff like, oh yeah, I went on a night out, oh yeah, it was a bit naff, yeah. That was sort of like their vibe. I know that they're not going to keep it forever, and especially that they're now in their sort of early 30s, and they're not going to be singing about the same things. But they could sort of add energy to sort of like the singing and the playing and that. It was sort of really quiet, it was just like, ugh. And I think that was sort of the main thing which put a lot of people off, and for people to say, oh yeah, this is like the worst Arctic Monkeys album. Yeah, it did annoy me quite a bit, but I think that there are other things that sort of push it up a bit more as well. But yeah, I think that they're the sort of the two main cons. Overall, this album's a bit, it's a bit naff. It's not the worst Arctic Monkeys album. I think it is better than AM, but it still doesn't compete for sort of their older stuff. And it is still a bit disappointing that we had to wait for 5 years for sort of an album which didn't fully sort of go into all of its ideas. There's some sort of good sort of stuff here and there and that. And I think that it's better that they actually took a risk this time, sort of adding in sort of these different genres and that. Unlike AM, which was sort of a bit too sort of generic. I liked that they were sort of moving ahead. They took the risk. Did it really pay off? I don't really think so, but yeah, I think there's still going to be some fans and that. Like some fans are sort of caught sort of like a sort of taste to it with sort of the new instruments and all that sort of stuff, which I think is pretty good because I don't know, there's still sort of some potential there with some of the songs, but yeah, I don't think this is like a really good album. It's not absolutely atrocious either, but overall I'm probably going to give this a 4 out of 10. So what do you think? I know that there's probably going to be a lot of mixed sort of reviews like, oh yeah, it's really good, this is really bad, but yeah, so what are your opinions? And yeah, I'll see you in 3 days' time.